Welcome to part two of Vera Diemoz's story. This interview was recorded in January of 2013, in which Vera describes the hard times of the 1930s.
Well, I got married in 1930, on June the 28th, 1930. My husband was living in Silt on the ranch, and we lived on the ranch, which was a big help because we had I raised chickens, and they had cattle, and pigs, and things like that you have on the ranch. And I raised a big garden, can about 800 quarts of between fruits, jelly, and jams, and things like that. And then
So you canned 800 quarts, did you say?
800 quarts
Of different things.
of different
jams.
things.
You got married in 1930, and that was a year after the big crash of the stock market.
Yes.
What did you notice of that time?
Well, it was bad because so many people had even committed suicide. In New York, they was jumping out of the buildings. I can remember that much about that. We were all scared, even on a farm, though, that we had plenty to eat because we didn't know just what was going to happen. And I remember my father-in-law was we was raising potatoes, and the guy offered him $2 a hundred out of the field. Well, then he said no, he wouldn't, because he said the potatoes would go up. So in the spring of the year, we had to sell them to the cattle people to feed them to the cattle for 10 cents on.
You had food on the farm, but what did other people do in town who were having a hard time?
A lot of time we helped just different people out. That were, like I raised I raised over 100 chickens, and I would like families. Like when the holidays came up, I made sure that they had something. And I would butcher the chickens, clean them all up and everything, and give them to them. And, of course, we had cream and butter. So I would fix a little bit of Velatine and give it to these families.
So you were taking food to people who were having a harder time.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Do you remember stories, particular people? You don't have to name them, but who had a really hard time?
There was this family. There was a large family, and they worked for us, and so they were real nice. And we told them to come up to the ranch, and when you dig your potatoes, usually you can't get the ones on the ends of them. So I told them to come and bring their shovel. We had the shovel. I told them, just bring up the kids. They can do it. And so they would dig the potatoes, and they had enough potatoes to last them all winter long.
So they would come up and get the ones that weren't picked up in the regular harvest.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so we would give them to the people that didn't have anything, that had large families that we knew they needed it.
The hard times lasted pretty much through the 30s, right?
Yeah, well, let's see. They started to feel, I think they started getting better about around, my son was born in 1932. Believe it or not, he was born in August the 15th, 1932. And that was the first time I voted. And so everybody says, who are you going to vote for? I says, I'm going to vote for somebody that gets us out of this hole. So we voted for Roosevelt at that time.
Ah.
And so then it went on, and things were starting. Then it started to get better. And then, of course, he started the CC camps.
Right.
Here in Glenwood Springs. They had a lot of boys, and a lot of the boys, they were glad to be there.
What are some of the projects that they did back then?
Well, they were out and cleaned up the forest and cleaned up around town and just whatever there was to do. They kept them busy.
So your son was born in 1932.
Uh-huh.
What do you remember about that time?
Well, about that time there, 1932, things were, as I said, we were on the ranch, so things were a lot better. But still, it was rough. And I paid my doctor bill with chickens, butter, and cream. That's
butter, and cream.
That's how I paid the bill. My bill was $75. That's how well I paid.
So you didn't have money. You used food to.
Well, he was born at home,
Oh, I
He was
see.
born at home. My neighbor came out to the house, and then, of course, the doctor and his wife was a nurse, so they came up. She called them, and they came up too, and see that everything was okay.
Well, that was pretty typical of those times too,
Oh
wasn't it?
yeah,
Where people
whoa.
were using food and commodities
Well,
to.
that's right, and that's what I did. So she was happy to get it, and I used to dress the chicken out. She says, "You don't have to draw it out, draw the chicken." I said, "Listen, when I do things, I'm going to do it right." And it took quite a long time to pay for it, but I got it paid. I was selling the chickens for $1 a piece.
So that took a few chickens to make $75. Huh?
And eggs were about 5 cents a dozen.
What other things did you trade for? You traded for doctor bills. Were there other things that you traded
Well,
commodities for?
a lot of time I took eggs to the market to get, like, if I needed something that we didn't have on the ranch, and eggs were 5 cents a dozen.
People out in the country had it a little easier than people in the cities. What
Much
stories
e-
were you hearing
yeah,
about
Yeah, because you didn't have to worry about your meat. You didn't have to worry about eggs and all that the milk and all that stuff. See, you had plenty of that. That we had plenty of. So actually, the farmers had it easy that way, but they had it hard because they couldn't get anything for the produce. Like if you sold potatoes and sold grain and all things like, there was no value to it.
So you said you voted for Roosevelt, and did you think that he was effective in helping end the depression?
Yes, he was. I truly do. I think he brought us out of that depression, like so many things they did for the young generation that really got them back to work. And started. It took time.
So did you know during that time that there was this great migration of people from
Yes.
Oklahoma to the coast?
Coast, yes, to California and to Colorado.
What stories were you hearing?
Well, we were hearing that we could, why let them come into the states? I mean, into here, into different states. I mean, cities, when we didn't have anything there.
So these folks were trying to move in and try to find things to
Well,
do.
they were trying to find jobs. They were trying to find some, to better themselves. Some of them, they even started gardens to have food out of the gardens.
I heard that some of them were relocated into Silt and Newcastle.
Yeah, Newcastle. There was some in Newcastle and some actually all those little mining towns because of the coal miners. They had mines in Newcastle and Silt. They had coal mines.
There was some fear about these folks coming in and taking jobs
from the local people. Like it's just like now, But yes, all the ones from the Mexicans are coming in.
the Latinos.
There's so much hard feelings there too. It was like that.
It was hard times. You were going to tell me about your mother?
Well, she used to take. So that we looked nice when we went to school. She would take and put laces on our dresses, or change them with a different color days, so the kids wouldn't make fun out of us. Because they used to call us little Dagos and little Wops. You go back to Italy where you belong, It was rough. I don't think it wasn't. The Spanish people think it's rough for them. They should have been here when we were here.
You got teased when you were a little girl.
Little girl, and I can remember that.
So why would your mother put fringe on? What would that do to make it?
Make it look different. Change the looks of the dress.
And make it look less plain, more fancy?
More fancy, So the kids would make fun out of a plain old dress.
So how long did you have to endure that prejudice? Was that most of your growing up time?
We got my brothers, they made up their mind. They says, one day the school teachers had a meeting, and she says to the whole class, she says, okay, we're going to get something settled here, once and for all. It says a lot of her family came from Italy, but they had somebody to sponsor them. When they came, they didn't sneak through a cross. They had somebody to sponsor them. And it says, and then I wanted to understand there'll be no more discrimination going on. It's got to be settled right here and now. And there was this one boy, Morns was their name. Oh, he was so ornery. He was so ornery. And he'd still go around and call us little dagos and wops. You know, we don't belong in this country. So my brother grabbed him by the hair and he says, young man, where did you folks come from? They weren't born in this country. So anyway, that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, that sort of set things straight then.
That
Huh?
finally got them straightened. So then my folks used to make sausage and things like that, you know. And the kids would have cake and pie and cookies in their lunch. So some of the Harts kids said, why don't you bring some extra sausage and I'll bring you an extra piece of cake.
So you were trading your kind of food, Italian food, for...
Italian food for the English food.
So when you brought your lunch to school, did it look a lot different than the other kids'
Yeah,
lunch?
more or less. Well, a lot of times we had brought hotcakes to school. Like us kids mother used to wrap our shoes up with gunny sacks to keep our feet warm when we went to school. And she'd warm up rocks and put them in a sled to keep our feet warm, too glad to get to cover ourselves.
Yeah, that sounds like the 20s did prepare you for the 30s. I mean,
Boy,
the 30s must have...
You're not a kid in there. It really did prepare us. And we didn't run to the store and buy a new... My brothers were older than us, so I'd wear their shoes. Couldn't afford to buy... had one pair of shoes to wear to school, but at home we had to wear my brother's shoes. My sisters, and my one brother, a couple brothers, I could wear their jeans, and I used to wear their jeans. At those times, they had those bib overalls, you know, and that's what we wore.
What do you think you brought from that time? I mean, how did it shape you as a person to have come through that?
I think it made me it really made me a good person out of me, and it made me appreciate things.
How did it make a good person out of you?
It made me feel like that I wasn't any better than anybody else, that everybody else has the same problems. It just made me feel good that I was brought up that way, that I came up that way. And I feel that I done something for somebody else that couldn't do it.
That was Vera Diemoz describing the hard times of the 1930s. To hear the rest of Vera's story, please go to part 3.